The new live-action Moana has hit theaters, so I think there's no better time than now to stop and rank every Disney live-action remake. These are movies that are so incredibly controversial on their own, so I'm sure that ranking them against each other will probably only make that worse, so don't let it just be me. Leave your ranking down in the comments below. And one more thing, just a heads up, I decided only to do remakes of movies that already exist or characters that already exist, so no sequels, because honestly, it gets a little bit hard to keep track of. With that being said, let's hop straight into it. Coming in last place for me is Pinocchio, just a total misfire in every imaginable way for Disney. For a lot of these movies, I simply look at them and say, that's not a very good or faithful adaptation, but for this, I just look at it and say, that is a terrible movie, straight up. I can't believe Tom Hanks is in this. I think it goes without saying that he can do so much better. I can't believe how little he's used in this movie. He just disappears for about 45 minutes there in the middle, leaving the story to be carried by Pinocchio, who is horribly written. He is so hollow and uninteresting as a character, and him, alongside almost every other aspect of this movie, left me bored to tears, and made the film feel like it was 3 hours long. The only positive I have is that I actually do think it looks pretty good. You can feel that Robert Zemeckis directed it in certain moments, but aside from those, it's a completely forgettable film. At 19, I have Mufasa. Just like Pinocchio, this felt like a chore to get through. Not only did I just not care about anything that happened in this movie, but as a prequel where I know everything that's going to happen to these characters, I couldn't even get invested in them. Obviously, you have the beautiful looking CGI animals, and I think there actually were improvements made from the first Lion King in terms of how lively the animals are and how well you can read emotions on their faces, but it's not enough to make that much of a difference. Also, when I think of this movie, I forget almost every time that it's a musical, and that's because the songs are atrocious, and there's not a single memorable one. In fact, the only one that I even do remember is just because it's horrible.
I make you go bye-bye. I make you go bye-bye.
At 18, I've got 101 Dalmatians with Glenn Close, and she is probably one of the first positives I can think of for the movies on the bottom of this list. I actually think she's pretty good in the film, but she's about it. There's nothing else. It's one of those remakes that I look at and just say, why? What is there to offer here? Even though, like I said, Glenn Close is very good, she's literally just doing the live-action version of the animated Cruella de Vil. And again, she's good, but it just doesn't mean anything. The rest of the movie is pretty hollow and doesn't do anything to stand out. Next up, I have Dumbo. I actually think this movie looks pretty good, but that's about all I have to say. It took a story that was so easy to get right, a movie that was only an hour and 4 minutes long, and turned that into a nearly 2-hour film that left me checking how much time was left every 2 or 3 minutes. I hate to call movies boring, but this is the definition of it. Maybe it was just the runtime, but I do think the elevated third act from the original works well here, but like I said, it could have just been me being happy the movie was almost over. At 16, I have Alice in Wonderland. I can see why a lot of people like this movie, and maybe I will too someday, but that day is not today. I think its main crime is a result of it following more closely to the book than the original movie, which I don't think is a bad idea, but the result of that is that you get a much less vibrant and whimsical version, which I think is one of the main draws of this film. I mean, the movie is about a place called Wonderland, isn't it? It should be vibrant, but I feel like it was obvious what was going to happen when you get a guy like Tim Burton to do this. He was always going to just take it and turn it into a more bland version of what it was before. I do think Johnny Depp is pretty good as the Mad Hatter, and then the only other positive I can think of is that this movie gives us the rabbit with the ticking clock meme, which I still think is pretty funny. My number 15 is Lady and the Tramp. This is another one of those movies that doesn't necessarily do much wrong, but the fact that it doesn't make the effort to get a bunch of extra things right means it just falls through the cracks into forgettable land with a lot of these other movies. But the reason that those are going to rank higher for me is that Lady and the Tramp doesn't mean much to me in general. I didn't have any sort of connection to the original, and so there was no nostalgia appeal here like there were with most of these others. So I'd probably say that objectively it does its job better than most of these other remakes, but when your job is to just remake something that's already pretty forgettable, I don't think that's really a recipe for success. At number 14, I've got Mulan. Now this is a tough film to rate for me because on one hand, I actually do like the visuals here. I think it looks good, and the story is still pretty compelling, but on the other hand, I still can't forgive them for getting rid of the songs. I understand you want to create realism, but come on, this is a Disney movie. Nobody cares if a bunch of army soldiers break into song. And I think the same thing goes for cutting Mushu out of this movie. Even though what you're left with is still a good film, not having those fun aspects make it feel so much less vibrant and less like what a Disney film should be. Just a movie that was still good, but a lot of really odd decisions held it back from being great. At 13, I know this is pretty controversial, but I have Snow White. I'm sorry, I understand the backlash this film got, and I get why it happened, but I can't deny the fact that when I sat in the theater and watched this movie, I had a good time with it. Obviously, Gal Gadot is completely lifeless as the evil queen, and the dwarves are a little bit unsettling, but for me, it's Rachel Zegler that sells this. Again, I understand the backlash, especially around her, but she was genuinely really good in this film. Pair that with what I think is one of the better directing jobs from Mark Webb and some really good new music, and you're left with a film that's a pretty fun watch despite all of the controversy surrounding it. My number 12 is The Lion King. I think there's a scale to these movies that really relies on how good the original is, so for me, like I said, the original Lady and the Tramp doesn't do that much for me, so the ceiling of how much I'll enjoy the remake is lower. But then on the flip side of that, for The Lion King, this is an animated film that I really enjoy, so the floor for a remake is going to be naturally higher. I don't really know if I'd say that this movie does anything particularly well, but it's a faithful adaptation of a great movie, and that's what makes it okay to watch. My main gripe is with the animals. Sure, the CGI looks amazing, breathtaking even, but it's just so hard to make a lion cub have emotions that you can see on its face while still trying to make it look realistic. And since this is The Lion King, that's a problem that's felt the whole time. But on the positive side, this is still Jon Favreau directing, and he is somebody that knows what he's doing, so the movie does look really good. So overall, visually, I can't complain, but it just doesn't do anything to try to set itself apart, so the flaws it has compared to the original feel more impactful and obvious. At number 11, this is where I have the new Moana movie. I think this is a faithful adaptation of what I would say is a phenomenal film. It's a beat-by-beat retelling of the same story, a note-by-note replaying of the same song, and almost a word-for-word version of the original script. For those reasons, it resembles a great movie and thus can be a very enjoyable watch, but I think this movie is the one that kind of just makes me roll my eyes and say, really? Why are we doing this? If you've seen my video essay about the Disney live-action remakes, you know that I feel like this is the first of the remakes that is done purely for money and nothing else, and even though that isn't apparent when you're watching the film, there does feel like there's something missing here. And I think it's just the heart and the compelling nature of the original, because you're essentially just telling a new creative team to go out and recreate a movie they had no part in creating in the first place. How passionate would you be about making a movie if you were just instructed to not use your own creativity, but make it look like someone else's? It's hard to quantify as something tangible, but there is a noticeable effect on this film that makes it feel less fresh and creative. If you want to hear my extended thoughts on Moana, I've linked my full review in the description and at the end of the video. But moving into the top 10, I have Maleficent. This is what I imagine when I think of what it looks like when Disney makes a live-action film based on an animated one that actually has a reason to exist. This isn't a faithful remake of something, it's a fresh and original story, with a strong cast and well-written characters. I'm not going to say that it does anything extremely well, like there's nothing about this film that I would call great, but it's just refreshing to talk about a movie that has its own identity and isn't just trying to recapture some sort of other film's magic. Telling the Sleeping Beauty story from another perspective is exactly the kind of creative twist I'd love to see with more of these movies, and the little story tweaks that leads to are really enjoyable. Like the slight change of Maleficent's maternal kiss being the true love's kiss that breaks the curse is really creative, and easily my favorite part of the movie. Overall, I'd call this a clear step in the right direction for Disney, but not a movie that I'd say is fantastic or anything. At number 9, I have The Little Mermaid. This is another one of those that's just a good adaptation of a great movie, so the floor is higher, but I do think this one does certain things really well. The added runtime allows the movie to explore Ariel's relationship with her father more, which is exactly what a remake should do with its longer runtime, because that makes the emotional core of the first movie even stronger. I also think Halle Bailey is really good in this role. I don't know if she does a whole lot new with the character or really is that different, but she does a great job of recapturing the essence of the original Ariel, so I guess that's all I can ask. But the casting I actually like the most is Melissa McCarthy as Ursula. This may be the first Melissa McCarthy role where I say that she was the best person to play the part. Usually I find her pretty annoying, but that's exactly what you want in this character, so I thought she was really enjoyable. It's a pretty good film without many clear or glaring problems, but it still just doesn't do enough to set itself apart. At 8, I've got Beauty and the Beast. I don't think this one needs a whole lot of reasoning. It's another faithful adaptation, but this one really excels in its casting. Emma Watson as Belle is a home run. She's a phenomenal actress, and I desperately wish she were in more projects these days, but she shines here. I also think this specific story is one that actually benefits from a live-action remake. You have these charming actors like Watson and Luke Evans that can capture the essence of the original characters, and then for the Beast, you now have the technology to make him look really good, but you can put a lot of effort into him and his CGI facial features since you're not making a movie where everyone is a beast, like The Lion King. The result is a really well-balanced movie, both story-wise and visually, that does its source justice while also carving out a little pocket for itself to be a great movie on its own. My number 7 is Christopher Robin. Like I said for Maleficent, I love when they take the characters and familiar stories and tell their own version, and that's exactly what this movie does. It's basically Christopher Robin all grown up and rekindling his relationship with Winnie the Pooh and Tigger and Piglet, who are all older and more weathered, and it makes for not only a really heartfelt dynamic between them all, but also a valuable lesson. I think these movies that send the message about adults getting too wrapped up in life and forgetting to have fun is a very important one, and I'm glad to see that this film got it so right. I also just feel like all of these characters are really likable, and it all just comes together to make a very strong film that I particularly enjoy. At number 6, I've got Cruella. I think based on my criteria for earlier movies on this list, you can probably tell why I like this one, and that's just because it takes a familiar character and does something new. A prequel for Cruella de Vil and her hatred for dogs doesn't feel like a movie that could have much depth or nuance, and I'd be lying if I said it had a lot of it, but it's a story that's just compelling enough to feel justifiable. Also, I think Emma Stone is one of the best actresses working today, so to see her leading a Disney movie that already has a leg up on the others was only going to make it better. I will say, I know I mentioned that the story doesn't have a ton of depth or nuance, and that can be felt most with the runtime. This is a solid 2 hours and 15 minutes, and I'm sorry, but there is no reason for any movie on this list to be that long. It's easily the biggest downside of the movie for me, but I still remained entertained the whole time. I loved Craig Gillespie's direction, and it's a shame he had to follow it up with that. But moving into the top 5, I have Lilo and Stitch from last year. I think the combination of a young, charming girl and a cute and mischievous creature is a dynamic that works well no matter how you make it. Live action or animation, it doesn't matter, and that makes this a really enjoyable movie. I do think it tries to drift too far toward a darker family drama, and those portions of the movie don't really work for me. They're kind of out of place, but when things stay lighthearted and fresh, I was thoroughly entertained. Zach Galifianakis shines here as the villain, and he's not the only one. I actually think this is one of the better ensemble casts on this list. And I don't know, there's not a whole lot to say here about this film, it's just a charming and really fun movie that I enjoyed a lot. At 4, I have Cinderella. This is one of the first remakes, and I think this is before they had started doing them just for the heck of it. You can feel that there was a clear intention behind this movie of making it better than the original, taking the first film and looking at what could be better and not being afraid to make those changes. That's what I wish these movies did more of, and that's what Cinderella is. Her extended backstory and fleshed out relationships with her stepmother and sisters make the central conflict of the movie that much more compelling, and her relationship with Prince Charming gets more time to breathe, so that benefits as well. This is just a fantastic example of what I wish the Disney live-action remakes were all the time. At number 3, I have Aladdin. I think the main thing here is that this is a story that translates really well to live action. The desert environments and the palaces are beautiful settings for this story, and bringing in a director like Guy Ritchie to capture them was a really good move. The casting here is probably the strongest part of the film. Mina Massoud as Aladdin is strong, and I wish he were in more movies these days, and then Will Smith is great as the genie. He's no Robin Williams, not even close, but the good part is that he doesn't really even feel like he's trying to be, so I appreciate him giving the character his own spin and establishing his own identity. And then Naomi Scott as Jasmine. I think she is an incredibly underrated actress, and she's phenomenal here as well. I think the music is awesome in this film, and all those things combined probably could have pushed this film to number 1, but unfortunately, the main thing holding it back is that I think the ending goes a bit off the rails. I don't think Jafar was very well cast at all, so in a finale where he takes center stage, I couldn't really get invested. He isn't very intimidating, and I don't really feel anything except slightly annoyed when he gets his way. But overall, this is a great movie that was so close to being higher. At number 2, I have Pete's Dragon. One thing I wish these Disney remakes did more of is take older movies that very few people have seen and remake them not only for the younger generation that didn't grow up with it, but also the older generation that may have missed it as well in their childhood. That's exactly what Pete's Dragon is. It's a heartfelt story with a very emotional core at its center, and a great director in David Lowery. He brings it behind the camera and makes this film look breathtaking. I also think it's very well written. The characters are compelling and their dynamics work together, and all of that combined makes for a riveting third act. I don't know, I can't really compliment it much more. It's just exactly the kind of film I wish Disney made more of. But coming in at number 1 is what I feel like everyone looks at as the prime Disney live-action remake, and that's Jon Favreau's Jungle Book. This movie takes the original and throws a darker spin on it, which I think does wonders for the story. It makes the jungle seem like a much more dangerous place, which it is for a little kid, and makes the characters you meet along the way have a lot more life. Kaa the snake is no longer a funny snake with hypnotic eyes, but rather a genuinely unsettling antagonist that has a much more sinister presence than in the original. And going back to the whole thing about not being afraid to make changes, that's another strength here. Favreau isn't afraid to throw new things at the wall and see what sticks. He turns King Louie from a normal orangutan to a ginormous and intimidating one that towers over everyone, which is such a simple thing to make his character stronger, but it's the little things like that that make this movie so good. Obviously, the relationship between Mowgli and Baloo is a very strong part of the film, and yeah, I can't compliment it enough. I don't really think there's much competition here at the top spot. I think The Jungle Book is the best Disney live-action remake of all time. But that's just my ranking. Be sure to leave yours down below. I genuinely want to hear from and talk to all of you down in the comments. If you want to help out the channel, be sure to like and subscribe. But with that being said, thank you so much for watching, and God bless.